My name is Eleanor Vance, and at 62 years old, I did something I never thought I had in me. I went away for 1 week to care for my injured sister in Atlanta. I came home to my beloved Savannah house, the one my late husband and I built together, only to find my son's wife had moved in, changed the locks, and redecorated my life into a cold gray box. Eleanor agreed, she told our neighbors, smiling that sweet, poisonous smile. Is that so? I thought, my heart turning to ice. I walked calmly to my car, made one single phone call, and the next morning, a for sale sign was hammered into the lawn. The buyer? My sister. And that was just the start of her world burning to the ground. Before we get into the heart of this story, if you're settling in for this, please take a moment to like and subscribe. I'd love to know where you're watching from. Is it morning coffee time in California? A quiet afternoon in Ohio? Or maybe a late night in London when you just can't sleep? Let me know in the comments below. Now, let me take you back to that humid May morning in Savannah, the day my world tilted off its axis. I woke up at 6, just as the first rays of Georgia's sun filtered through the Spanish moss hanging from the ancient oaks outside my window. It had been 3 years since my husband, Richard, passed, but the house still felt like it was holding its breath, waiting for him to walk through the door. At 4,500 square feet, this grand Victorian lady was more than just a house. It was a living scrapbook of our 40 years together. Every creak in the floorboards was a memory, every sunbeam a ghost of a shared laugh. I could still see him standing by the grand bay window in the living room, a cup of coffee in hand, watching the cardinals flit between the branches. He called them his little red soldiers, guarding our peace. I made my way downstairs, my hand trailing along the polished oak banister Richard had spent a month restoring, sanding and staining it back to its original glory. He'd whistled the whole time, a cheerful, off-key tune. In the kitchen, I brewed a pot of coffee, the rich aroma of familiar comfort in the echoing silence. I took my mug out to the veranda, overlooking the garden. Richard's roses were in full, glorious bloom, deep crimson, delicate pink, and sunny yellow. He'd named each bush after a woman in our family. The sturdy, deep red one was the Eleanor, he'd said, because it was beautiful, strong, and had a few thorns to protect itself. I hadn't felt very thorny lately. I twisted the simple gold band on my finger, a habit I couldn't break. The roots were strong, my love, but a storm was coming. My gaze drifted to a photo on the mantelpiece inside, our son, Leo, at his college graduation. He had Richard's kind eyes, but my stubborn chin. That photo was taken 5 years ago, before Tiffany entered his life, and a subtle frost began to creep into our relationship. I remember the first time he brought her home. She was beautiful, polished, with a smile that never quite reached her eyes. She complimented the house, but in a way that felt like she was assessing its value, not its warmth. "This place is a gold mine, Eleanor," she'd said, running a perfectly manicured finger over an antique sideboard. I thought it was a clumsy compliment at the time. Now I see it for what it was, an appraisal. He and Tiffany lived just 2 hours away, but it might as well have been 2,000 miles. Visits became shorter, phone calls less frequent, always with Tiffany's voice in the background, prompting him, correcting him. The last time he'd been home was for a brief, strained Christmas 2 years prior. I'd baked his favorite pecan pie, and Tiffany had loudly remarked that they were avoiding processed sugar. I told myself it was just life, that sons grow up and build their own worlds. But deep down, a mother knows. A mother feels the distance like a physical ache. The sharp ring of my phone cut through the morning quiet. It was my sister, Charlotte, her voice tight with a pain she was trying to hide. "Ellie, I'm so sorry to do this, but I had a stupid fall, down my own stairs. I've fractured my hip and I need surgery." Charlotte was my rock, the pragmatic, no-nonsense financial analyst to my more sentimental nature. For her to admit she needed help meant it was serious. "I'm on my way," I said, no hesitation. "Don't you worry about anything." Upstairs, I threw clothes into a case, my mind already in Atlanta with her. I tried calling Leo while I packed. Straight to voicemail, of course. Hi, sweetheart. It's Mom, I said, trying to keep my voice light. Aunt Charlotte's had an accident, so I'm heading to Atlanta for about a week to help her out. The house will be empty, but everything is locked up tight. I love you. Please call me back when you get this. Before I left, I paused at the door to Richard's study. His will was in the safe, along with the other important family documents. Our lawyer, Franklin, had mentioned some specific provisions Richard had insisted on adding in his final months. Something about protecting the family home. But in the fog of grief, I'd never paid much attention. Richard always handled that side of things. I'd trusted him completely. I did one last walkthrough, checking every window, every lock. I set the alarm system. The house was secure. My sanctuary was safe. What could possibly happen in just 1 week? I locked the front door, the scent of Richard's prize-winning roses filling the air, never imagining that the next time I saw my home, it would be unrecognizable. And that was just the beginning of the nightmare. The flight to Atlanta was a blur of anxious thoughts. I found Charlotte at Piedmont Hospital, looking small and pale against the stark white sheets, but her spirit was as indomitable as ever. "Took a tumble," she grumbled, trying for a smile. "Guess I'm not as spry as I used to be. Don't you dare say I told you so about the runner on the top stair." "The thought never crossed my mind," I lied, squeezing her hand. The surgery went well, and the relief was so profound it almost brought me to my knees. I spent the next 2 days in a haze of hospital corridors, beeping machines, and the antiseptic smell that clings to everything. I read trashy magazines to Charlotte, we reminisced about our childhood, and for a little while I forgot about the quiet, empty house waiting for me back in Savannah. Charlotte, ever the pragmatist, brought it up. "Did you get a hold of Leo?" she asked, her voice raspy. "Left a message," I said, trying to sound casual. "You know how busy he is." Charlotte gave me a look. It was a look that said, "I know you, and I know you're making excuses for him. That wife of his, she's a piece of work, all sparkle on the outside, all sharp edges underneath." I'd brushed off her concerns before, accusing her of being too cynical. Now her words echoed with a chilling presentience. On the third day, as Charlotte was sleeping, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. "Mrs. Eleanor Vance?" A polite, professional voice asked. "This is David from Secure Home Insurance. We're just calling to follow up on a query we received about your policy." "My policy?" I asked, confused. "I haven't made any queries." There was a slight pause. "Oh, well, we received a call this morning from a Miss Tiffany Vance. She was inquiring about the process for updating the policy and adding her name as a co-owner." The hospital room suddenly felt cold. The air thinned. "A co-owner?" I repeated, my voice barely a whisper. That's a mistake. She is my daughter-in-law. She has no ownership of my property." "Of course, Mrs. Vance," David said quickly, sensing the shift in my tone. "That's why we're calling to verify. We require the primary policyholder's direct consent for any such changes. We told her as much, but she was quite insistent. Said it was for estate planning purposes and that you had given her verbal permission. Her tone was, if I may say, unusually demanding." Estate planning. My estate. The audacity of it stole my breath. "Thank you for calling me, David. I appreciate you letting me know. There will be absolutely no changes to my policy." I hung up the phone, my hand trembling. It had to be a misunderstanding, a gross, overstepping misunderstanding. I immediately dialed Leo. Voicemail. I left a message, my voice tighter than I wanted it to be. "Leo, I just received a very strange call from my insurance company. They said Tiffany called them trying to get her name put on the house policy. You need to call me back right now and tell me what on earth is going on." Hours passed. The silence from my son was deafening. Finally, a text message blinked onto my screen. It was from Leo. "Mom, relax. Tiffany's just helping organize things. Talk later." Relax? My heart hammered against my ribs. Organize things? What did that even mean?
You don't call an insurance company to organize things. You call them when you're trying to take control. The casual, dismissive nature of his text was worse than no reply at all. It was a deliberate brush-off. He knew what she was doing, and he was letting it happen, or worse, he was a part of it. I looked at my sister, sleeping peacefully, oblivious to the panic churning inside me. This wasn't just about a house anymore. This was about a fundamental violation, a betrayal that cut deeper than I could have imagined. I had to get home. I booked the first flight back to Savannah for the next morning. Charlotte was in good hands with her friends, and suddenly, my own home felt like it was in terrible danger. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying the conversation with the insurance agent, Leo's dismissive text, and Tiffany's sweet-as-syrup voice at our last family gathering. The pieces were clicking into place, forming a picture I didn't want to see. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a calculated move. Organize things? That's what he called it. I would soon find out that Tiffany's idea of organizing was a hostile takeover. And if you think this story is wild, please take a moment to like and subscribe. You won't believe what I came home to. The taxi ride from the Savannah airport was the longest of my life. Every red light felt like a personal affront. Every slow driver a conspirator in my agony. When we finally turned onto my tree-lined street, I saw it. Tiffany's pristine white SUV was parked in my driveway right where Richard used to park his old pickup truck. It was like seeing a vulture perched on a gravestone. I paid the driver, my hands fumbling with the cash. I walked up the familiar brick pathway, my suitcase rumbling behind me like a drumbeat of dread. I reached for my keys, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I slid the key into the lock. It wouldn't turn. I tried again. Nothing. It was jammed. No, not jammed. The lock was different. The familiar brass knob had been replaced with a cold silver keypad. They had changed the locks on my home. Rage, cold and sharp, pierced through my shock. I pressed the doorbell, the chime echoing strangely in the afternoon quiet. For a moment, the door swung open. Tiffany stood there, wrapped in a silk robe that probably cost more than my monthly grocery bill. She had a mug in her hand and a perfectly practiced look of surprise on her face. "Eleanor, you're back early," she chirped as if I were a guest who had arrived ahead of schedule. She didn't move from the doorway, blocking my path. "What have you done, Tiffany?" I asked, my voice low and shaking. "We were so worried about you being all alone in this big place. We decided Leo and I were time to move in to help take care of you." I pushed past her, into the foyer, and my breath caught in my throat. The living room, it was gone. Richard's worn leather armchair, the one molded to the shape of his body after decades of reading, had vanished. The antique coffee table his mother had given us was replaced by a sterile glass and chrome monstrosity. The walls, which I had kept a warm, buttery cream for 20 years, were now a stark, lifeless gray. Family photos had been taken down, replaced with abstract art that looked like paint spills. "My things," I whispered, turning in a slow circle. "Where are my husband's things?" "Oh, that old stuff," she said with a wave of her hand. "Most of it's in storage. Some of it we donated. Honestly, Eleanor, you should thank me. The place has so much more potential now. It looks clean, modern. We've increased the property value." My legs felt weak. I stumbled towards the dining room. The grand mahogany table where we'd hosted 30 Thanksgivings was gone, replaced by a tiny, minimalist table for 4. The house didn't just look different, it felt different. It felt violated. The warmth was gone, bled out and replaced with a cold, arrogant emptiness. It was Tiffany's house now. "You had no right," I said, my voice rising. Just then, I heard footsteps on the stairs. Leo appeared, and he had the decency to look ashamed, avoiding my eyes like he did when he was a boy and had broken a vase. "Mom, you're back." Leo, what is this? I pleaded, looking at my son, searching for the boy I raised. How could you do this? How could you move into my home, throw away your father's memories without even asking me? He shifted uncomfortably. Tiffany said you'd be happy to have us. You're always saying you're lonely. I say I'm lonely because my son never visits, not because I want you to stage a coup and steal my home. Tiffany stepped between us, placing a proprietary hand on Leo's arm. Now, Eleanor, let's not be dramatic. We're family. And we have some wonderful news. She placed her other hand on her perfectly flat stomach. I'm pregnant. We're going to have a baby.
The room spun. A baby. My grandchild. It was the one thing I'd longed for, the one dream I held on to. And she was using it as a weapon, a shield, a justification for this desecration. She stood there, smiling that venomous smile, telling me she was having my grandchild while standing in the ruins of my life. But the pregnancy lie wasn't even the most despicable thing she did that week. The pregnancy announcement was a masterstroke of manipulation. It was designed to silence me, to corner me. What kind of grandmother throws her pregnant daughter-in-law out on the street? For 2 days, I was in a state of shock, retreating to my bedroom, the one room they hadn't yet touched, and locking the door. I felt like a prisoner in my own home. The air was thick with tension. Every time I ventured out for a glass of water, Tiffany would be there, humming, rearranging things, acting as if she were the gracious lady of the manor and I was a difficult, senile relative. Then came the party. On Saturday evening, cars started pulling up outside. I heard music, laughter. I cautiously opened my bedroom door and saw the house filled with people. Tiffany, dressed in a stunning cocktail dress, was holding court in my desecrated living room. She had invited all our neighbors, friends, and even Leo's boss. She had thrown a housewarming party. I saw my dear neighbor, Mrs. Gable, a sweet widow who had lived next door for 30 years. I watched as Tiffany cornered her by the fireplace. I couldn't hear every word, but I saw Tiffany's gestures, the concerned frown, the gentle hand on Mrs. Gable's arm, the sad shake of her head as she glanced up the stairs towards my room. Later that evening, there was a soft knock on my bedroom door. It was Mrs. Gable, her face etched with worry. "Eleanor, dear, are you all right?" she whispered, slipping inside. "That young woman, she's telling everyone the most dreadful things." "What things, Martha?" I asked, my stomach twisting. "She said you've been having episodes, memory lapses. She said you begged them to move in because you were afraid of being alone, and now you've forgotten you ever asked. She made it sound like they've made this huge sacrifice to come and be your caretakers." The humiliation burned like acid. These were my friends, people who had brought me casseroles after Richard died, people I'd shared morning coffee with for decades. And now they were downstairs, drinking my wine, while my son's wife painted me as a pathetic, delusional old woman. But the true gut punch came when I saw her talking to Leo's boss, a man named Mr. Henderson. I crept to the top of the stairs, hiding in the shadows. Tiffany's voice was a stage whisper of feigned distress. "It's been so challenging," she sighed, dabbing at a non-existent tear. "Eleanor's health has been declining so rapidly. We just couldn't bear the thought of her being here all alone if something happened. Leo's been so stressed, trying to balance his work with worrying about her. We knew we had to step in, even if it meant putting our own lives on hold." She was positioning them as saints, as martyrs. She was using my supposed frailty to elevate their status, to make Leo look like a devoted, heroic son. It was a performance worthy of an Oscar. I saw Mr. Henderson pat Leo's shoulder later, a look of sympathy on his face. My son didn't correct her. He just nodded, accepting the unearned praise. He was complicit in the assassination of my character.
I retreated back into my room, my body trembling with a rage so profound it felt like it could shatter bone. She wasn't just stealing my house. She was stealing my identity, my dignity, painting me as a crazy old woman. At that moment, I felt utterly alone. But Tiffany's ambition didn't stop at my reputation. The party was a public declaration of war, but the next attack was silent, insidious, and aimed directly at the heart of the life Richard and I had built. On Monday morning, while Tiffany was supposedly at a prenatal yoga class, I found an email in my inbox with the subject line, "Unusual Account Inquiry Notification." It was from my bank. My blood ran cold. I threw on a coat over my pajamas, not even bothering to brush my hair, and drove to the downtown branch of Savannah First Bank. Mr. Abernathy, the branch manager who had handled our finances for 20 years and had given a beautiful eulogy at Richard's funeral, saw me from his glass-walled office and immediately waved me in, his expression grave. He said, "Eleanor, dear, I was going to call you this morning. I'm so glad you came in." I said, "The email, Robert. What happened?" He took a deep breath. "Tiffany was here. On Friday afternoon. She came in and asked to speak with me privately. She had a copy of her marriage certificate to Leo, and she inquired about the process for gaining signatory access to your primary savings account." I gripped the arms of the chair. This was the account where we had saved for retirement, the nest egg Richard had worked his entire life to build for our future, for my security after he was gone. It was our life's work, distilled into numbers on a screen. "She told me," Mr. Abernathy continued, choosing his words carefully, "that with your declining health, the family felt it was prudent for her to be able to help manage your finances to pay bills on your behalf should you become incapacitated." He shook his head. "She even used the phrase power of attorney and asked what documentation would be needed." "I have never signed any power of attorney," I said, my voice like ice. "I know," he said gently. "I told her that without a legally executed power of attorney document or a direct in-person authorization from you, we could not and would not grant anyone access. I assured her our protocols were ironclad." She was very polite, but persistent. She said she would be back with the necessary paperwork soon. I felt a wave of nausea. This was premeditated. The whispers to the neighbors, the performance for Leo's boss, it was all part of a larger strategy. She was laying the groundwork to have me declared incompetent. First, she would isolate me socially by making everyone think I was losing my mind. Then, she would seize control of my finances. The house was just the first piece on the chessboard. She wanted everything. I thanked Robert for his integrity and for alerting me. He assured me the accounts were secure and had been flagged with a high-level security alert. No one could touch them without me being present. But the assurance did little to calm the terror coiling in my gut. She had tried to get her hands on my life savings, my own son's wife. I drove home, my hands shaking on the steering wheel, realizing I was no longer just fighting for my home. I was fighting for my life. Tell me in the comments, what would you do in this situation? Fight or give up? I read every single one.
That evening, the atmosphere in the house was thick enough to cut with a knife. I avoided them, eating a sandwich alone in my room. But they were waiting for me. Around 8 o'clock, Leo knocked on my door. "Mom, can we talk? All of us, as a family." The word family sounded like a curse. I walked down the stairs to find them sitting at the cold, modern dining table. Tiffany had a folder in front of her. She gestured for me to sit, a queen granting an audience. "Eleanor," she began, her voice sickeningly sweet, "Leo and I have been doing a lot of thinking, and we've come to a decision that we feel is in everyone's best interest." She slid a glossy brochure across the table. The cover showed smiling, silver-haired seniors playing tennis. The title read, Willow Creek Meadows, Gracious Senior Living. I stared at it, speechless. "It's a wonderful community," Tiffany continued, as if she were selling me a timeshare. "It has a golf course, a swimming pool, 24-hour medical staff on site. It's safe, Eleanor. Much safer than rattling around in this big old house. The stairs alone are a hazard." "I am not moving to a nursing home," I said, each word a chip of ice. "It's not a nursing home," she corrected, her smile tightening. "It's an active lifestyle community. We could take a tour this weekend." I pushed the brochure back across the table. "No." The sweetness vanished from Tiffany's face, replaced with a cold, hard glint in her eyes. "Fine," she said. "If you insist on staying here, then we need to make some adjustments for everyone's safety and comfort, especially with the baby coming." She opened the folder. "We've decided it would be best for you to move into the downstairs apartment, the basement suite. It has its own entrance, so you can maintain your independence. But it's all on one level, no stairs to worry about. It will give us the space we need upstairs for the nursery and for our family to grow." My basement? They wanted to put me in my own basement? It was a finished space, yes, but it was still the basement, a place for storage and laundry. I looked at Leo, my heart screaming, "Say something, defend me, be my son." He just stared at his hands, which were clasped tightly on the table. He said nothing. His silence was his consent. That was it, the final straw. The last thread of hope I had for my son snapped. "Get out," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "Both of you. You have 3 days to pack your things and get out of my house." Tiffany actually laughed, a short, sharp, ugly sound. "Or what, Eleanor? Are you going to call the police on your own son? Drag your pregnant daughter-in-law into court? No judge in the world would evict us. Think of the headlines." She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "I promise you this. If you fight us, you will never, ever see your grandchild. Leo will never speak to you again. You will die alone in this house. Is that what you want?" I looked at my son. He finally lifted his head, but his eyes were cold, empty. He had made his choice. To be threatened with exile to my own basement or a nursing home by my own family? That night, hiding in the only room they hadn't touched, Richard's study, I cried until I had no tears left. And then I found it. The study was my last sanctuary. Tiffany hadn't breached its walls yet, probably because the old skeleton key was one she hadn't managed to replace. The room was exactly as Richard had left it. The scent of old books, leather, and his faint, lingering scent of pipe tobacco clung to the air. It was the only place in the house where I still felt him, where I didn't feel like a ghost in my own life. My grief and rage had burned out, leaving behind a cold, hard clarity. Crying wouldn't save me. Pleading with my son wouldn't save me. I had to save myself. I went to the large oak desk that had been his pride and joy. My hands moved with a purpose I hadn't felt in years. I was no longer a grieving widow. I was a woman cornered, and a cornered woman is a dangerous thing. I opened the bottom drawer, the one that always stuck a little. I rummaged past old tax returns and bank statements until my fingers brushed against a thick, sealed manila envelope. In Richard's elegant, familiar script, it read, "For Eleanor, to be opened only in the event of family conflict." My breath hitched. Family conflict? He knew. Somehow, my wise, wonderful husband
had seen the storm clouds gathering even when I had been blind to them. My hands trembled as I broke the seal. Inside were 2 documents. The first was a letter. My dearest Ellie, if you are reading this, it means my worst fears have come to pass. I have watched the way that girl, Tiffany, looks at our home, at our life. I have seen the way she manipulates our son. You have a heart that is too good, too trusting. You see the best in people even when it isn't there. I love that about you, but it also worries me. This house is your fortress, our legacy. Do not let anyone, not even our own son, take it from you or make you feel like a stranger within its walls. Tears streamed down my face, blurring his words. I have taken steps to protect you, the letter continued. You are stronger than you know, my love. You are the descendant of stubborn, iron-willed women. Find that strength now. Fight for yourself. Fight for the peace you deserve. I will be cheering for you always. Forever yours, Richard. The second document was a copy of his will. A single paragraph was highlighted in yellow, a paragraph I had never truly read. It was dense with legal jargon, but the meaning was crystal clear. It stated that in the event that my, quote, personal safety, quote, mental well-being, or, quote, undisputed right to sole occupancy was threatened by a family member through coercion, manipulation, or unauthorized habitation, I, as the surviving spouse, maintain the full, absolute, and unrestricted right to sell, transfer, or otherwise dispose of the property without the requirement for familial consent. It was a legal kill switch, a weapon he had forged for me from beyond the grave. The next morning, I was at Franklin's office at 8 a.m. sharp. He was a kind man, a friend as much as a lawyer. I laid the letter and the will on his desk, my voice shaking as I recounted the events of the past week. He read the highlighted clause, a slow, grim smile spreading across his face. He said, Franklin was a smart man. He was very specific when he had me add this 6 months before he passed. He said, Franklin, a man must protect his queen even if he's no longer on the board. Franklin looked at me, his eyes kind but firm. Eleanor, this document gives you absolute power. The house is yours to do with as you see fit. So the question is, what do you want to do?
Even from beyond the grave, my Richard was protecting me. His words were the armor I needed. Tiffany thought she had won. She had no idea she'd just declared war on the wrong widow. Thank you so much for sticking with me on this journey. If you've made it this far, please comment with the number 1 so I know you're here with me. Your support means the world. I left Franklin's office with a spine made of steel. The grief and fear had been replaced by a cold, burning resolve. I drove not home, but to a small cafe by the river, a place where Richard and I used to share Sunday brunch. I needed to think, to plan. I ordered a black coffee and pulled out my phone. There was only one person I could call. Charlotte, I said when she answered, her voice still a little groggy from the pain medication. I need your help. I told her everything, the insurance call, the party, the bank, the nursing home brochure, and finally the letter from Richard. I read her the clause from the will. For a long moment there was silence on the other end of the line. I could almost hear the gears turning in her brilliant financial mind. That magnificent bastard, she finally said, and I knew she was talking about Richard. He really did think of everything. Her voice, which had been soft with sympathy, now hardened with the sharp edge of a CEO about to close a deal. So, what's the plan, Ellie? Eviction is messy and takes time. She'll play the pregnant victim card. I'm going to sell it, Char, I said, the words tasting strange and powerful on my tongue. I'm going to sell the house.
Good, she said instantly. That's decisive. That's a power move. But sell it to whom? In this market, it could be snapped up by developers who will tear it down. Do you want that? No, I don't. The thought of Richard's roses being bulldozed made my heart ache. Okay, Charlotte said, her voice all business now. Then here's what we're going to do. It's a bit dramatic, but I think the situation calls for it. I'm going to buy it. I was stunned. What? Charlotte, you can't. It's worth millions. I'm aware, she said dryly. I'm a financial analyst, remember? I've been looking to diversify my portfolio with more real estate, and I've always loved Savannah. It's a sound investment. But more than that, her voice softened, it's our family home. I'm not letting some gold-digging viper take it from us. A plan began to form between us. A beautiful, ruthless strategy forged over the phone line between Savannah and Atlanta. We can't just do a private sale. That's not enough. She needs to feel the public humiliation. She needs to panic. We list it publicly, Eleanor. We put a sign on the lawn so big it blocks the sun. We create a frenzy. And then you come in? I asked, catching on. And then I come in with an all-cash offer, 20% over asking price. It's an aggressive offer, enough to blow any other potential buyers out of the water and ensure a quick closing, but it's not so ridiculously high that it looks like fraud. It's a power play that looks like a savvy investment. We'll give her the shock of seeing the for sale sign, the terror of thinking she's about to be homeless, and then the final crushing defeat of realizing the house isn't going to some stranger. It's staying in the family. Her new family is out, and the real family is taking it back. A slow smile spread across my face for the first time in a week. It felt good. It felt right. She won't see it coming. Not in a million years, Charlotte chuckled. She thinks she's playing checkers with a sad old lady. She's about to find out we're playing chess, and the queen is about to take her king. The plan was set. It was ruthless, it was calculated, and it was beautiful. The next morning, Tiffany would wake up to her worst nightmare planted right on our front lawn. The next morning, I was up before the sun. I had called a realtor Franklin had recommended, a sharp, discreet woman named Patricia. I explained the situation briefly, emphasizing the need for speed and shock value. She understood immediately. At 6 a.m., while Leo and Tiffany were still asleep upstairs, Patricia's team arrived. They moved with quiet military precision. I watched from the kitchen window as two men hammered a sign into the perfectly manicured lawn Richard had been so proud of. It wasn't a small sign. It was a massive, glossy billboard of a sign. For sale, iconic Victorian estate in historic Savannah, priced for immediate sale. It was glorious. It was a declaration of war. I made a pot of coffee, took it out to the veranda, and sat in my rocking chair. I was a general watching the battlefield on the morning of a great victory. I waited. At 8:15 a.m., Tiffany's white SUV came gliding down the street from her morning trip to the coffee shop. I saw the moment she saw the sign. The SUV swerved slightly, then screeched to a halt in the middle of the road. She sat there for a full minute, frozen. Then the car door flew open and she stormed up the walkway, her face a mask of disbelief and fury. She wasn't wearing her silk robe now. She was in expensive yoga pants and a designer top, but her constructed composure was gone. "What the hell is this?" she shrieked, her voice cracking. The whole neighborhood could hear her. I took a slow, deliberate sip of coffee. "I believe it's called a for sale sign," I said calmly. "It indicates that the property is on the market." "You can't do this," she screamed, her hands clenched into fists. "We live here. This is our home." "This is my home," I corrected her gently, "and you have been living here without my permission for exactly 8 days. That does not grant you residency. It makes you a trespasser." Her face went from red to a blotchy white. She whipped out her phone and frantically dialed Leo. I could hear her screeching into the phone, a torrent of accusations and panic. "She's lost her mind. She's selling the house right out under us. You have to come home now." Within 20 minutes, Leo's car tore down the street and skidded to a stop behind Tiffany's. He got out, his face pale and drawn. He looked from the sign to his hysterical wife and to me, sitting serenely on the porch. "Mom, what are you doing?" he pleaded, his voice filled with desperation I had no sympathy for. "The time for talking is over, Leo. I gave you a choice. You chose her. Now I'm making my own choice." Just then, as if on cue, Patricia, the realtor, walked up the path, all professional polish and efficiency. "Good morning, Eleanor," she said brightly, completely ignoring Tiffany and Leo. "The online listing just went live. My phone hasn't stopped ringing." The queen of our quiet little street was having a very public meltdown, and the show was only beginning.
The online listing was a masterpiece of subtle warfare. Patricia had used photos from before the invasion, showcasing the warm, cream-colored walls and Richard's beloved leather armchair. The description spoke of a home filled with love and cherished memories, waiting for a new family to honor its legacy. It was a direct repudiation of the cold, sterile environment Tiffany had tried to create. Tiffany saw it on her phone and let out a strangled gasp. "Those are the old pictures. You're trying to erase us." "On the contrary, my dear," I said. "I'm restoring what you tried to erase." Leo looked utterly lost, a ship without a rudder, caught between his manipulative wife and his immovable mother. "Mom, please," he begged. "Think about the baby. Where will we go?" "You could have thought about the baby before you decided to colonize my home," I replied. "But since you brought it up," I turned my gaze to Tiffany. My eyes narrowed. "You've been telling everyone about this pregnancy. You must be so excited. I imagine you have the ultrasound photos in your wallet, on your phone. You must look at them all the time." A flicker of panic crossed your face. I don't have to show you anything." "You don't," I agreed. "But you'd think you'd want to show your husband. Leo, have you seen a picture of your child?" Leo looked at Tiffany, a seed of doubt finally rooting in his eyes. "Well, no," he admitted. "She said she wanted to surprise me at the next appointment." "How thoughtful," I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "But surely you have the first ones, the ones from the appointment where she confirmed the pregnancy, the one she must have gone to before she decided to uproot your entire lives and move into my house?" Tiffany's face was turning a pale shade of green. I deleted them by accident to make space on my phone. Even Leo, in his state of willful blindness, couldn't swallow that. "You deleted the first ultrasound photos of our baby?" he asked, his voice incredulous. Before Tiffany could concoct another lie, Patricia stepped forward, tablet in hand. "Eleanor, we have a situation. We've just received an official offer. It's quite remarkable." She turned the tablet so we could all see. It was a formal offer letter, all cash, a closing in 10 days, and the price was a full 20% above my already generous asking price. Tiffany's jaw dropped. Leo stared dumbfounded. "That's $500,000 over asking," he whispered. "The buyer is an investment LLC from Atlanta. They're extremely motivated," Patricia said smoothly, playing her part perfectly. "It's a lie! This is fraud!" Tiffany shrieked, grabbing Leo's arm. "No one would pay that! She's faking it!" "The offer is legally binding, and the proof of funds is already in escrow," Patricia said, not even flinching. "They're waiting for your answer, Eleanor." I looked at my son, whose world was visibly tilting. I looked at his wife, whose mask of control was cracking into 1,000 pieces. And I looked at the offer on the screen, my sister's promise made real. You could literally see the gears turning in my son's head as his wife's empire of lives started to crumble.
The final confrontation was set for the lawyer's office, and a truth even I didn't see coming. The closing was scheduled for a week later, at Franklin's downtown office. The intervening days were a blur of frantic activity from Tiffany. She hired her own lawyer, a slick-looking man who sent Franklin a blustering letter about squatters' rights and emotional distress. Franklin sent back a one-page reply citing the specific clause in Richard's will and a copy of the trespassing warning I had formally given them. We heard nothing further from the lawyer. On the day of the closing, the air in the conference room was electric. I was there with Franklin and Patricia. Leo was there, looking like he hadn't slept in a week. He had insisted on coming, saying he needed to see this through to the end. Tiffany arrived with him, but not beside him. There was a visible distance between them now. She was pale, her eyes darting around the room like a trapped animal. "The buyer will be here shortly," Franklin announced, looking at his watch. Tiffany scoffed. "If there even is a buyer, this is all a sham." At exactly 2 p.m., the conference room door opened. A woman walked in, dressed in a sharply tailored navy blue suit, her high heels clicking decisively on the polished floor. She carried a leather briefcase and radiated an aura of calm, unshakable authority. It was my sister, Charlotte. Tiffany's jaw unhinged. Leo let out a small, choked sound. "What is this?" Tiffany stammered. "This," Charlotte said, placing her briefcase on the table with a solid thud, "is called a real estate transaction. I am the managing partner of the investment LLC that is purchasing this property." She gave Tiffany a smile that was all teeth. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you. I've heard so much about you." "This is a conspiracy! It's illegal!" Tiffany shrieked, jumping to her feet. "On the contrary," Franklin interjected smoothly, "it is a perfectly legal, arm's-length transaction. Your sister-in-law is paying a premium price for a highly desirable property. It's just good business." Charlotte opened her briefcase. "And speaking of good business, I did a little due diligence. I'm a financial analyst, you see. We're very good at background checks. It's amazing what you can find in public records." She slid a file across the table toward Leo. "This, for instance, it's a civil complaint filed 2 years ago in Charleston, South Carolina, against a Miss Shaw. That was your maiden name, wasn't it? The complaint was filed by the son of an elderly widower. It alleges undue influence and intentional infliction of emotional distress after Ms. Shaw moved into his father's home and attempted to isolate him from his family. Sound familiar?" The color drained from Leo's face. He opened the file. His hands were shaking. "That's not true," Tiffany cried, her voice shrill. "And this," Charlotte continued, pulling out another document, "is a credit report. It shows 3 maxed-out credit cards under your name and a car loan that's about to be repossessed. You told my nephew you had a trust fund from your grandmother. It seems that trust fund has been remarkably inactive." Checkmate. In that one moment, Tiffany's entire world collapsed. My son finally saw the monster he had married. But the story wasn't over. My sister had one more surprise up her sleeve. The rest of the closing was a formality. Tiffany sat in stunned, silent fury while Charlotte signed the papers with a flourish. The house was officially sold. My house was now my sister's house. As the new owner, Charlotte announced to the room, her voice clear and firm, "I am giving the current unauthorized occupants exactly 30 days to vacate the premises, not a day more. After that, I will have the sheriff escort you out." Leo didn't even look at Tiffany. He looked at Franklin. "Can you recommend a divorce attorney?" he asked, his voice hollow. The fight went out of Tiffany completely. She slumped in her chair, a queen dethroned. The game was over, and she had lost spectacularly. As we were packing up our briefcases, Charlotte turned to me. "Ellie, I have one more document for you." She slid a folder across the table. It wasn't a closing document. It was a set of architectural drawings and a lease agreement. I looked at the drawings. It was my house, but reimagined.
The floor plan showed the property divided into two distinct private residences. The top two floors were a spacious owner's suite, and the entire ground floor, the main living area, the dining room, the kitchen, and Richard's study, had been redesigned into a beautiful, self-contained apartment with its own private entrance and a new set of French doors leading directly into the rose garden. I looked at the lease agreement. The tenant was listed as Eleanor Vance. The landlord was Charlotte's LLC. The term was for life, and the rent was listed as $1 per year. "I can't," I whispered, my eyes filling with tears. "Charlotte, this is too much." "Don't be ridiculous," she said, squeezing my hand. "The house is too big for me to use as just a vacation property, and I'm certainly not managing renters from Atlanta. I need someone on site to make sure the place doesn't fall apart. Besides," she smiled, "someone has to take care of Richard's roses. It's in the lease, non-negotiable." I laughed through my tears. "You thought of everything." "That's what sisters do," she said simply. We left the law office and stepped out into the bright Savannah sunshine. It felt like I could breathe again for the first time in weeks. Leo was waiting for us on the sidewalk. Tiffany was gone. He approached me hesitantly, his face a mess of shame and regret. "Mom," he started, his voice thick, "I don't know what to say. There are no words." "No," I said, my voice gentle but firm. "There aren't. Not right now." I looked at my son, the boy I loved more than life itself, who had broken my heart into a million pieces. "I will always love you, Leo, but my trust, that is something you are going to have to earn back, and it's going to be a long, hard road." He nodded, tears streaming down his face. "I know," he whispered. "I'll do whatever it takes. I promise." For the first time in a very long time, I believed him. I was coming home, for real this time, to a place where I was safe and loved. But what about my son? Could our relationship ever recover from such a deep betrayal? The 6 months that followed were a period of quiet reconstruction, both of the house and of my family. Charlotte's contractors descended on the property and worked with incredible efficiency. They were respectful of the home's historic character, and under Charlotte's exacting direction, they transformed it. My new ground floor apartment was a dream. It was my home, but distilled to its essence. The rooms that held the most memories, now brighter, fresher, and opening directly onto the garden that was my soul's anchor. Leo kept his promise. He moved into a small, furnished apartment downtown and started seeing a therapist. He filed for divorce. Tiffany, true to form, tried to fight it, but with the prenuptial agreement he'd foolishly signed and the evidence of her fraud, she was left with nothing. She disappeared from our lives as quickly as she had appeared. Leo and I began a slow, painful dance of reconciliation. We started with weekly phone calls. They were stilted at first, full of long silences. Then we graduated to meeting for coffee at a neutral cafe halfway between his apartment and my house. He never made excuses for his behavior. He owned his weakness, his willful blindness, his betrayal. "I knew, Mom," he admitted one afternoon, staring into his coffee cup. "Deep down, I knew she was lying. About the pregnancy, about you being confused. But I was weak. She made me feel powerful, important. And it was easier to believe her version of reality than to confront the truth that I had married a predator. It was easier to make you the problem than to admit my own catastrophic mistake." His honesty was brutal, but it was necessary. The cracks in our relationship were deep, and they couldn't be papered over with easy apologies. They had to be cleaned out, examined, and filled with the hard truth. One Sunday, he came to the house for the first time since the sale. He brought a small peace lily in a pot. He looked around my new apartment, at the familiar furniture now arranged in a new way. He saw the photo of him at his graduation back in its place of honor on the mantel. "He'd be so disappointed in me," he said quietly, his eyes welling up. I went to Richard's study, which I had insisted on keeping exactly as it was.
From the bottom drawer of his desk, I retrieved another envelope, this one addressed simply to Leo. The instructions on the back read, "To be given to him when he is ready to hear it." I handed it to him. "I think you're ready now." His hands shook as he opened it and read his father's words. I knew them by heart. It wasn't a letter of anger, but one of profound, sorrowful love. Richard wrote about how a man's character is not defined by his mistakes, but how he rises from them. He wrote about a man's duty to protect his family, especially its matriarch. "Your mother is the strongest, kindest woman I have ever known," the letter concluded. "If you have hurt her, it is your job to make it right. Girlfriends and wives may come and go, son, but you only get one mother. Don't let pride or shame keep you from being the man I know you can be." He folded the letter, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. For the first time since he was a little boy, he let his mother hold him. We sat there in the garden, mother and son, surrounded by Richard's roses, finally starting to heal. I thought the drama was behind us, but Tiffany had one last desperate card to play. A full year passed, life settled into a new, peaceful rhythm. My apartment was my sanctuary. Charlotte would come down from Atlanta once a month, and we'd act like teenagers again, drinking wine in the garden and gossiping. Leo was a regular presence in my life again. He was quieter, more thoughtful, the arrogant swagger Tiffany had encouraged, replaced with a gentle humility. He was in a support group for people who had been in manipulative relationships, and it was there he met Sarah. She was a nurse, kind and ground to earth, with a laugh that made you want to laugh with her. Then one Tuesday afternoon, the ghost of our past reappeared. I was pruning the roses when a beat-up old Honda pulled up to the curb. Tiffany got out. The designer clothes were gone, replaced with worn jeans and a faded t-shirt. Her hair was limp, her face was pale and drawn. She looked defeated. She approached the gate hesitantly. "Eleanor, I need to talk to you." I felt no anger, no pity. I felt nothing at all. "We have nothing to talk about, Tiffany." "Please," she begged, and her eyes filled with tears. This time, they looked real. "I'm pregnant, for real this time, and I have nowhere to go. The father wants nothing to do with me. I'm all alone."
I stood my ground. That is a consequence of your choices. It is not my problem. Just then, Leo's car pulled up. He was picking me up for a doctor's appointment. Sarah was with him in the passenger seat. He got out of the car, and his face froze when he saw Tiffany. Her eyes lit up with a desperate final gamble. "Leo," she cried, rushing towards him. "Thank God. I was just telling your mother. I'm pregnant." Leo didn't flinch. He looked at her, his expression calm and unreadable. He let her finish her frantic, tearful plea. Then he spoke, his voice quiet but firm. "Tiffany, that baby is not mine." "Yes, it is," she insisted. "We were together, remember?" "I remember. I also remember going to a fertility specialist after we got divorced, just to make sure everything was okay for the future. I have the test results. I'm sterile, Tiffany. A bout of mumps as a teenager. I can't have children." It was a brilliant, stunning lie. I knew for a fact he wasn't sterile, but she didn't. The lie was a shield, a final, impenetrable wall against her manipulation. Her face crumpled. The last card had been played, and it was a dud. Sarah got out of the car and walked over, slipping her hand into Leo's. She smiled warmly at me. "Ready to go, Eleanor? We'll be late." Tiffany stood on the sidewalk, utterly defeated, as she watched the family she tried to destroy drive away, whole, happy, and healed. She turned and shuffled back to her car, a ghost fading into the afternoon sun. We never saw or heard from her again. That Thanksgiving, our table was full. It was me, Charlotte, Leo and Sarah, Franklin and his wife, and dear Mrs. Gable from next door. As I looked at the faces around me, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. Tiffany had meant to steal my home,
But in the end, she gave me a gift. She forced me to find a strength I never knew I had. She burned away the dead wood in my family, allowing for new, healthier growth. I had learned the hardest and most valuable lesson of my life. Setting boundaries isn't about pushing people away. It's about teaching them how you deserve to be treated. Protecting your peace isn't selfish. It's an act of survival. So, what do you think? Was I too harsh? Or was this a long overdue lesson in consequences? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if you have ever had to stand up to a manipulative family member, please share your story. We are all so much stronger when we know we are not alone. Thank you for listening, and please subscribe for more stories about finding your power.